there are causes which propel us into certain situations. And while there's a lot to say about this, I won't say a lot, except to say that this suggests a certain kind of meaningfulness in our own actions of body, speech, and mind. Intentions are hugely important in creating the life that we have. And even if we just think in terms of one life, you know, if you walk into a room with a certain kind of attitude, things unfold a little bit differently than if you have, let's say, a conscious attitude of wishing to bring something, to offer something of your own kindness into the room. And in the end, Buddha put these two things together, really, in the final watch of the night, and recognized that all of us are dying and being born in accordance with our actions, which means there's tremendous power in our actions, especially if we do them with intentionality. Intentionality, even the simplest action. And for us as practitioners, this means that the cultivation of a positive intention, which I'll say more about later, which is really central, the compassion, the sense of connection. We're all connected. This means we have all been in every possible relationship with each other in the past. And even if we don't take past lives literally, we know that our connections are impacted by how we behave in relationship to another person. If you smile, they might smile back. If you use harsh words, you're more likely to hear harsh words back. In some ways, this is common sense, what is being ingrained here in the Buddhist tradition as cause and effect of actions. And we see it also in our own practice. We sit and we settle, as we will do shortly, and we start to feel a little differently. It just happens. And we sit with intention. May this somehow, even if I don't know how, may this be of benefit. May my calming be beneficial to me and allow me to be of more benefit to others. That intention itself changes what we accomplish with our action. So in one sense, in one very simple but I think important sense, just this very brief synopsis of Buddha's awakening reminds us of our own capacity to be awake as much as we are able, to recognize, I think it's very energizing to recognize that what we do, and above all, how we do it, actually matters. You know, a lot of us, especially through COVID, we're disconnected. What does it matter what I do? Maybe there's a little bit of that feeling. Nobody sees me. I'm alone. Who has not had that feeling sometimes? And so I think one import of this brief synopsis of Buddha's awakening is we're all connected, and therefore whatever we do impacts the whole chain and thread of interconnections among us. And therefore, it is wise and kind for us to take even a moment before practice or before listening, for example, to Nathaniel. Oh, may this be of benefit. May I learn something that will help. And later we will have a tok, we will bless food, we will enjoy the food. May my doing this somehow feed others. May all be somehow entrained into enjoyment through my actions. So I want to check with you, Nathaniel, and your time, because I know you have, are you able to sit here? Basically, might we do a few minutes of practice first, or is it better in terms of you, and we're happy for you to share now what you have in mind to share with us?
When you say a few minutes, how many minutes do you mean? I'm sorry.
Tell me what you need to, I know you need to go, so maybe it will be better if you speak first. We can meditate for 10 minutes, but that may push your schedule, so that's why I'm checking with you.
I probably need to leave about half past the hour.
Okay, so why don't you...
So I have about 10, 12 minutes, I think, of something to say, and then a few
Okay,
minutes of whatever you like, questions, comments, some reflection or from you.
okay. I would like to suggest that we all simply sit for 1 minute, okay, to create a motivation and intention to be here, to be clear, just to relax. Okay, I'm watching the clock. It'll be 1 minute, Nathaniel, and then it's all yours for as you're able. Feel contact with your seat. That's helpful. Please begin.
Thank you, Lama Rigzin. It's wonderful to be with all of you on this holy day of Sagadawa. Every now and again, I find myself having to gently correct somebody who refers to the Buddha, as if Buddha were a personal name. Maybe some of you have done that too. It's an honest mistake, for sure. To correct it means that you have to explain to someone that Buddha is not a name, but a title or epithet, a word that means awakened. If we insisted on using only English to refer to him, we'd therefore refer to the teachings of the awakened one. We'd go for refuge to the awakened one. We'd joke about fake awakened one quotes, awakened oneism. So when we celebrate the Buddha's awakening, we're celebrating literally what makes the Buddha Buddha, awakened. Who is the Buddha? What kind of person was the Buddha? What is awakening? These are really big questions, and I'm not really going to attempt an answer to them. Honestly, we could spend years reflecting on these questions, and the truth is I have 10 minutes. The real challenge, though, isn't time, but the fact that there are different answers to these questions, depending on our perspective, depending on our understanding, depending on our own inclinations, even depending on where we find ourselves on the path. Of course, the Buddhist tradition itself and our own lineage teachers have all recognized this fact. Some of you may know that in the first chapter of Longchenpa's Precious Treasury of Philosophical Systems, Longchenpa tells not one, but at least 4 different stories of the Buddha's awakening, each one of them corresponding to the perspective of one or another of the various vehicles of Buddhist practice as they are found in the sutras. The first story that he tells there is the traditional story that's common to all Buddhist traditions. And that goes something like this. 3 immensely long eons ago, in a previous life, the Buddha was an ascetic who was magnetized by the example of a Buddha that he encountered and first gave rise to bodhicitta in emulation of that Buddha's example. And then over the course of those 3 immensely long eons, in life after life, he practiced the perfections for the benefit of others. And in so doing, he encountered many other Buddhas, and he trained as their disciple and under their tutelage. And then he finally took birth here in northern India, or in what is now Nepal, awakening to Buddhahood, turning the wheel of the Dharma, and then entering nirvana. That's the traditional story that's common to all Buddhist traditions. The first one that Longchenpa tells. What Longchenpa calls the quintessential and definitive meaning of the Buddha's awakening, however, is a story from the highest perspective, which is found in sutras such as one that's called The Meeting of Father and Son, and also in a very famous sutra that you've probably all heard of called the Lotus Sutra. And in that story, the Buddha was in fact awakened countless eons ago, And ever since then, he has guided beings in the ways that are most appropriate to them. So from this perspective, from the moment that we encounter the Buddha to be when he first gives rise to bodhicitta in that first story, eons ago, down to his final life in this world when he's born in Lumbini, grows up as a prince, renounces the world, awakens under the Bodhi tree, what we're encountering from this perspective is in fact a playful display, an instruction, an example for us to emulate. So Longchenpa says, he demonstrated giving rise to bodhicitta in spite of already being a Buddha, so that beginners would not feel inadequate. And he then demonstrated practicing the perfections so that bodhisattvas would do the same. And he finally demonstrated awakening as a Buddha so that bodhisattvas on the path would aspire to do the same themselves in other times and in other places. Now, it's not quite that when we encounter different narratives of this singular event of the Buddha's awakening, that it's a matter of choose your own adventure. And it's also not that we have to decide which one of them is true, so to speak. Of course, when we hear different, seemingly contradictory accounts of the same event, it's perfectly natural for us to wonder which of them is true and to assume that they can't all be. But when it comes to stories about the Buddha's awakening, what I want to suggest is that they can all be true, because these are never merely stories. They're also pith instructions. They're practical guides for how we might be humans and Buddhas too, to use the wonderful words of Lama Rigzin. In this sense, they're all true stories. So with that in mind, here's one. When I first encountered the person of the Buddha by way of stories about his life and awakening, I was 17 years old. I knew almost nothing of Buddhism beyond the barest basic facts like the ones you'd remember for a game of trivia, or what I had encountered as a high school student in the work of beats like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. So I had no real sense of the tradition or a traditional frame of reference, only the sense that the Buddha was a real person who had lived 2,500 years ago in India. So when I first met him, it was Prince Siddhartha I met, and he was, for me, utterly unique. He wasn't God's son, that is human, perhaps, but not a human I could identify with. He wasn't a god, he was a man, an extraordinary man, but still a man, a human being. He was born and raised in the midst of the best that the ordinary world has to offer. His father was a king, powerful and wealthy. He raised his firstborn son and heir, whom he named Siddhartha, to be powerful and wealthy himself. And so the Prince Siddhartha grew up in the lap of luxury, like a Kardashian or a Jenner. As a child, he received the best education at which he excelled. As a young man, he was trained to be a warrior, at which he excelled. With his physical beauty and prowess, his promise as a future king, his intellectual brilliance and personal charisma, his virility, he won the hand of a beautiful princess to whom he was married. And according to the norms of that time and place, the stories tell us that he also had a harem of beautiful women to entertain him, every one of whom he is said to have pleased. He had every kind of wealth and pleasure available to a person of his station. He lived a life of leisure, prepared to succeed his father one day as a warrior king in northern India. In one of the sutras, the Buddha himself is describing this time in his life to his students, and he says, I lived in refinement, utmost refinement, total refinement. My father even had lotus ponds made in our palace, one where red lotuses bloomed, one where white lotuses bloomed, one where blue lotuses bloomed, all for my sake. I used no sandalwood that was not from Varanasi. My turban was from Varanasi, as were my tunic, my lower garments, and my outer cloak. A white sunshade was held over me day and night to protect me from cold, heat, dust, dirt, and dew. I had 3 palaces, one for the cold season, one for the hot season, one for the rainy season. During the 4 months of the rainy season, I was entertained in the rainy season palace by minstrels without a single man among them, and I did not once come down from the palace. Whereas the servants, workers, and retainers in other people's homes are fed meals of lentil soup and broken rice, that is dalbat. In my father's home, the servants, workers, and retainers were fed wheat, rice, and meat. But then, as the story goes, one day, this spoiled young prince encountered an old person, wrinkled, bent with age, arthritic, able to walk only with great effort. And it was as if he was encountering for the first time the fact of aging. Then he encountered a sick person, someone who was feverish and racked with pain. And again, it was as if he was encountering for the first time the fact of illness and susceptibility to illness. And then he encountered a corpse being carried to the cremation fire down by the riverbank. Maybe it was the body of someone his own age, maybe even the body of a child. But again, it was as if he was encountering for the first time the fact of mortality. And in each of those encounters, he was struck by the brute existential fact that, like everybody else, he too would grow old, get sick, and die. And all those that he loved would grow old, get sick, and die. And there was nothing in any of those refined pleasures and any of the power that he already had, that he was so rich in, that would prevent that. There was nothing that he had then that would keep old age, sickness, and death at bay. Like everybody else, he was bound to grow old, get sick, and die. And so he began to wonder about the possibility of what he would later call to his disciples the noble search, which he described like this. There's the case where a person, being subject to birth, seeing the drawbacks of birth, seeks the unborn, unexcelled rest from the yoke, awakening. Being subject to aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement. Seeing the drawbacks of aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement. Seeks the agingless, illnessless, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, the unexcelled rest from the yoke, awakening. This is the noble search. And so he determined that he would engage in this search, that he would find for himself and for the sake of those he loved, that which is beyond birth, beyond aging, beyond death. And so the sutra says, at a later time, while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with the blessings of youth, I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. The story goes that he snuck out of the palace in the middle of the night so that nobody would see him and try to stop him. He stole one last look at his sleeping wife, and then he left, giving up his silken garments and putting on rags and wandering into the forest. At that point, he sought out the two most well-known meditation teachers of the time, and he mastered the systems of practice that each of them taught. He was even asked to eventually succeed them at the head of their respective communities, but he wasn't satisfied with what he had found there. He was convinced on the basis of his own experience that all that he had found were temporary, mundane attainments. And so then he went off on his own with only 5 companions back into the forest, and he spent years engaged in what we would call extreme acts of self-mortification, thinking that if he punished his body, he might free his heart and mind, which was a common idea among practitioners at the time. But he discovered that this too was a dead end. For 6 years, the stories say, he engaged in what he called the noble search, first mastering the various spiritual approaches at the time, and then engaging in austerities. But, as the scripture says, he came to see that those austerities would amount to nothing. He then breathed freely in and out and partook again of solid foods such as rice and porridge. He rubbed ghee and oil into his skin and took refreshing baths in warm water. When he came to a village, the village headman's daughters gave him milk that had been churned 16 times and mixed with honey to drink. He was lauded by a Naga king, and he accepted a bundle of auspicious golden-colored kusha grass from a grassmonger. From there, he went to what would be the site of his awakening. He arrived and settled cross-legged into an unshakable absorption on an unshakable bed of kusha grass. Sitting straight and erect, he settled his mind and said, "I shall not uncross my legs until I have achieved the undefiled state." His intention pledged, he said, "So long as I have not found an undefiled state, I shall not uncross my legs." It was the full moon of the 5th month of the lunar calendar, just like today. And the sutra says, during the midnight hours, through the power of his loving kindness, he subdued Mara and his retinue of 360 million demonic spirits. And unsurpassed wisdom arose within him. And as Lama Rigzin has already explained, over the course of the 3 watches of the night, he awakened to what the tradition would later call the 3 knowledges. And then, as dawn broke, he was finally Buddha, awakened. There's a verse that the Buddha is said to have spoken as soon as he was awakened, and this is a very famous verse that's found in a number of sutras. It's found in the Pali Canon, it's found in the Mahayana Sutras, it's sometimes repeated in various commentaries in the Tibetan tradition, so you may have heard this before. There are 2 slightly different versions of it that I think are worth repeating and reflecting on. So this is the verse that the Buddha is said to have spoken as soon as he was awakened. "This truth to which I have awakened is profound, subtle, luminous, hard to comprehend, inconceivable, beyond the intellect. Understood only by the wise, it is out of step with all worldly people and difficult to see. It is the exhaustion of craving, and it is cessation free of desire. It is nirvana." And then more concisely, "This Dharma that I have attained is deep, hard to see, hard to realize, peaceful, refined, beyond the scope of conjecture, subtle, to be experienced by the wise." This is what the Buddha spent the next 45 years of his life teaching to others out of compassion. This is exactly the Dharma that we encounter in the sutras, in our lineages, and in our teachers. This is what we seek as the nature of our own minds, in fact, what is profound, subtle, and luminous. This is what we're trying to awaken to ourselves so that we might be humans and Buddhas too. And I want to leave you with another passage about the person of the Buddha. Sometimes, at least for me, the Buddha himself might seem somewhat remote or inaccessible. And so I find it useful and inspiring to remember that what motivated the Buddha to leave the shade of the Bodhi tree on that full moon day of the 5th month so many years ago was love, was a heart full of love for all those who would encounter him over the course of those 45 years in India. But not only them, I don't think. I honestly imagine that with his Buddha eye on that morning, he saw us too. There's a sutra that says, "It is in the nature of such beings like him to watch over the world with their Buddha eye during the 3 times of the day and night. They know and see who has fallen, who has flourished, who hurts, who wants, who is unhappy, who is headed for a miserable rebirth, who will fall into a miserable rebirth, who will decide to rise from his path towards a miserable rebirth and land in a high status rebirth, liberation, or awakening, Who will reach out his hand to those sinking in the mud of desire? Who lacks the riches of a noble being's treasures? Who will come to the magnificent wealth of a noble being's treasures? Whose Buddhahood, with its attendant fruits, will ornament the world? Whose latent roots of virtue will bud? Whose budding roots of virtue will blossom? And who, having blossomed, will be freed? The home of noxious water beasts may in time evaporate, but the love of Buddhas for their disciples shall not. As a mother holds dear and protects her only child, Buddhas too hold dear and protect their disciples. An omniscient mind's compassion never wanes in its quest for the young calves it nurses. So its love for those who fall to the miserable realms in samsara is like the cow's love for its fallen calf. Happy Sagadawa to all of you.
Thank you so much. Happy Sagadawa, great blessings. Wonderful to revisit, to see Buddha thinking about us all these many years ago. Thank you. You were about to leave, is that right, Nathaniel?
That's right, I have an academic conference, unfortunately.
Yes, I know you do. Felicitations to Jose, please.
I will.
Give him our warm best.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Much love to all of you.
Love to you too. Thank you. Happy Sagadawa.
Happy Sagadawa.
So once again, we see that the core of the story is connection, and out of connection, a sense of kindness, compassion. Buddha awakened to something that he felt would be really helpful to people if only they could understand it. At first, he didn't think they would, if you know the story. But finally, he was actually requested to teach, and did so for the rest of his life. And what we have available to us is a dependent arising, is directly connected to the Buddha's teaching. So, as we reflect on connection, kindness, compassion, we bring those intentions to our own practice. So I'm going to suggest we do a little bit of practice now. I'll say about something about that in a moment. And we will also today, as we said in closing, Rinpoche wrote a full moon prayer, which we will share. We have some handouts for you who are here. It's also available online. And then we'll bless what we have here for Tzok to enjoy in another room. We're not allowed to eat in this room. You folks online, if you have something available that you can set up as Tzok, we will bless it. So how do we express our compassion and connection? Most importantly is by being in the present, which is not where we usually are, if we're honest. So we take this moment, we always begin in our practice, as you know, 3 pillars, bringing us just naturally into the present. Feeling support, feeling the contact, not the idea of contact, the actual felt sense of contact that you have with your seat, your cushion. Just takes a second. You feel it, right? That's happening in the present. So you're sensing into this present moment by sensing your contact with your seat. It's that simple. And there's support that comes to you from the very center of the earth, which is directly beneath you. All of us sitting on the earth, everywhere in the world, are sitting directly above the same center. So when you feel this support, it means you have support. It means you have a place to rest. It's something you can trust, your seat. Trust is a big deal. So there's a seed of it just in your willingness to sit. Buddha sat under the tree. We sit under the tree of our own aspirations. And when you sit with this deep seat, feeling that contact, you're also sensing the bottom of your body and a certain natural strength there. And so the upper part of your body flows up from your hip area, rises. It's natural human body. So that each rib, horizontal rib in your upper chest, is supporting the one above and is supported by the one below. And you can feel a certain way that it feels when your torso is rising, as it were, not stiff. It's a natural curve in your back. If you have injuries that you need to be careful of, please be. There's something coming alive as you sit like that, and yet it's very easy and very relaxed. Your shoulders are easy. Your hands are easy. And even if you like, there's an actual natural alignment between the center of your earth, the center of your belly, your heart, your throat, your crown, the apex of space, are all in alignment. So these are three supports: your seat, your skeletal structure, this alignment with the center of your body. Paying attention to what we sense brings us immediately into the present. You sensed your seat. You sensed your body. You can go a little more subtle. What if you sense your breath? Your attention is with your breath. Breath means breathing. Breath is not a still object like your cushion. So let your attention be with your breath, and only that. With the mind sometimes, more often than not, will go to something else. No problem. As soon as you awake to your mind's gone elsewhereness, you're in a very friendly way, in just a moment, just bring it back to your breath. So we'll do 3 2-minute sessions of just being present to your breath, as much as possible for those 2 minutes. Then you'll sound the gong. You can look around if you wish. Come back to your breath for another 2 minutes. 3 2-minute sessions beginning now. And again, why are we doing this practice? Any practice? From the perspective of Buddhist teaching known as the Great Way, the Mahayana tradition, it's all out of compassion. It is all out of a wish to benefit. Buddha said, actually, at birth, he said, when he walked out of his mother's womb, we are told, he said, I am here for the benefit of the world, for the good of the world. And it's all summed up in a short verse that I want to read you, because I just actually came across it again yesterday, going over my translation. Adzom Trukpa, who was very central in our lineage, quotes this in his Lamplight for the Path, his discussion of foundational practices. This is everything you've always wanted. If you've been around Buddhism long enough to know, especially Tibetan Buddhism, that it's enormous. As Nathaniel, there are four, Longtime gives us four versions of the Buddha's life, for one thing. There are multiple schools of philosophy. There are thousands of practices and teachings, and, you know, what's a girl to do who just has this life and, you know, a little bit of time for a session in the morning and evening? Here you go. This is the sutra that perfectly encapsulates the Dharma. Adzom Trukpa quotes this, as I said, in his teaching on compassion. You who seek awakening, who seek Buddhahood, don't train in multiple dharmas. Train in a single dharma. What is that one? Great compassion. When you have great compassion, it is as if all the Buddha's teachings are in the palm of your hand. This was why the Buddha arose, why he sat, why he taught, why the tradition continues, how the tradition continues. Compassion likes to express itself. Compassion, like breathing, is not just some state of stillness. There's action in compassion. In Buddhist tradition, we talk about the six perfections. You may be familiar. Shantideva's great work. Compassion moves one to act, moves one to feel, to have intention. So in our practice on Sundays, we also have an active aspect, we can say, to our practice. And this was given to me into my hand by Adzom Rinpoche himself when I asked him, could we please have a practice that's very simple, that everyone can feel something from, right from the start. And this is very simply the practice of sounding the sacred syllable hum, hum, hum. Hung in the tantric traditions is the sound of Buddha's awakened mind. It's therefore the sound of compassion and wisdom entwined. That's what hung is. And when we sound it, this hung comes out of the center of your chest. And of course, when you sound, the sound ripples through your entire body and out into the room, offering the sound of wisdom, compassion to everyone in the room, to everybody in sight and sound of us, and in our imagination to the entire world. And for the mind opens easily to the entire universe. If I say Milky Way, if I say, 1 billion light years from now, what do you say? 1 billion light years away from here, the birthplace of the universe, and right away your mind does something, right? This little mind is not a little mind, it encompasses it all. So when we sound home, you can imagine that there's a letter H, if you like, made of light in your chest. So the sound is coming out, and we are present to the sound. And that's it. And being present to the sound, you're in the present, so you are poised for compassionate activity because you're in the present. One other thing, it's good for you. As the Houston Chronicle observed yesterday, there's an article about the vagus nerve, very important nerve that goes from the brain all the way through the body. It's really important for health, for brain activity, for everything. And it turns out, this scientist who never heard of sounding home said that when you sing or hum, right? It vibrates your vagus nerve. And this is actually extremely good for the whole body. So, out of compassion for yourself and your body and all beings, we'll take a half minute to sit again. Just find your 3 pillars. Observe your breath. Observing your breath is always a way. It's always there. You're stopped at a red light, you can observe your breath. It's being in the present. And then we'll sound home together. And you folks online, please feel free to release your sound and put on audio. Even if it's a little cacophonic, we like to hear each other home. We'll be silent for a bit. Back to the present. With the intention of animating, bringing forth, sending out your compassion with the sound home. And we do this by sounding home, home on each exhale. And everyone, you find your own rhythm. Find your own rhythm of home, home, feeling that the sound, just sensing how the sound is arising, and you hear it. And you're hearing everyone's sound. And this is our connection. So we'll do this for a bit, okay? You do it at your own pace. Om. And again, resting with your breath. Wonderful. This is our Sunday practice. We alternate between silent and sounding. And today we've taken time to celebrate Sagadawa. And for some of you, this is the first time you're receiving this practice, so how auspicious. Directly from Aza Rinpoche, who is in lineage alignment from the very beginning days of the tradition, going back to Buddha. So here we are. So I'd like to just pause for a moment before we go on to our prayer and our blessing the food, to say hello in a more personal way. You're here, we haven't seen you for a while. You're online, how wonderful. And just for people in the room, I think we don't all know each other. If it's okay, just say your name, okay? Lama Namgyal Dorje. I have to help him because he's working. Please, just go around the room and just say your name, and so we'll get to know you. Say it loud.
Jason, Martha,
What did you say? Hello. Jake, I couldn't hear you. Brian. Thank you. Hello. Wonderful. Why don't you all say your names at once, ritually? Just turn on your audio and say your name.
Lori.
Wendy.
David.
All right then.
Stacy.
Hi, Sue.
Perfect. We've broken the fourth wall. Thank you. Comments or questions? We have a microphone. Oh, we don't. We have this.
This is
All right.
Lori. I'll say it's wonderful.
What did you say?
I say it's wonderful. This is a marvelous gathering.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lori.
Can this mic work?
We can't move it. We can just repeat. Is that all right? Project loudly and I'll repeat. Thank you.
I just like to say, it's lovely to be back. It's been a years.
You know what? Here.
Hold on.
Just kind of use this. Is that okay? All right.
Hold on, hold on, hold on.
Okay. Yeah, when we first started, I just felt like I've been caring for an elderly father who has dementia, and I just felt utterly exhausted. I felt exhausted. Oh, there we go. I hear me now. It doesn't go that far. There we go. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I just felt really exhausted at first, and oh, okay. All right. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I just felt just really exhausted, and I thought I might be about to fall asleep and snore on everyone. But and as we practiced, my energy just kept sort of not even dropping, just it felt like it was going thump, 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 you know. And I finally quit fighting the exhaustion, you know, and just energy I wasn't trying to do anything with my energy anymore. It just was. And then when we went from there to the awe, I just felt very just uplifted again, you know. And so anyway, that was my experience, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to see you again. Anybody else? Short but sweet?
Anybody online?
You're smiling, that's already communication. Thank you. You look like you're about to say something, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this the first one of these back? Because I learned about this from your website.
Good.
But I didn't know if they were still happening or if they're just barely starting up again.
Both. I think we just started in March up again, and so now we are meeting. And the first Sundays, we meet at 10:30 because we have a talk, like we do with Kaisu or one of us, or there's a talk, a Dharma talk. And then we do this practice, and we're going to introduce also to enrich our Sundays, there will be some reading of a wonderful, very short teaching and some time for conversation. So yes, we're continuing. Please come back.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're all invited too. Yes, Vatana.
Thank you very much, Kaisu and Nathaniel, who's not there anymore. In keeping with what Kaisu spoke of, my daughter said something very interesting, very similar yesterday. She says she got up in the morning. We have 4 cats, ranging from 19 years of age to 7 months. And she said, what could be more important in your life than pampering them today? Okay.
Yeah, indeed.
Giving love is the most important thing. In the end, what makes a meaningful life? Yeah.
It's lovely because Kaisu restrained herself from telling her cat story. So it came out anyway. Kaisu, it came.
It was in the transmission.
It was such a long story that it would be a talk in itself. So I had to scrap the cat from my talks today. But thank you, Vatsana, for bringing them in.
We'll invite you to bring back your cat story another moment.
Yeah.
I think we all have little loved one stories, cat, dog, bird, etc. Hamsters, anyone?
Children.
I don't know. Children, of
Remember
course.
children. We were all children once.
Jason.
Yeah, we talk about how bringing intention to things is, what gives it, I guess, our actions their power. I remember I had a book that just listed I don't know, maybe 10,000 mantras or something. And there's 3 that I thought were pretty amazing that were for transforming phlegm that you cough up into a offering for, the world. So, and then another for, excreted waste, also transforming it into an offering. And just that idea that even the most mundane or even unpleasant actions that we go through can be turned into something good for everyone.
Wow.
It's lovely.
That is so profound. That's the core of Tantra and Dzogchen also. Everything is intrinsically pure and can be revealed to be so. So thank you. Thank you. And that's what we do in our Vajrasattva practice, as many of you know. I'm mindful of the time, although it feels like we're all having a good time. Would like now to invite you. So this is a prayer that our teacher, Adzar Rinpoche, created to be done on the full moon, because there are already prayers in the Buddhist tradition for the 8th, the 10th, the 25th, but not for the full moon. So we have this, we have a few handouts here. I hope you can share.
These will need to be shared.
What you will need to share. We've got 5 to hand, is that 5 to hand out, so hopefully 3 people can share each one.
So one of the features, yes, of this prayer is that at a certain point, we can mention people who are in the bardo. So we have
You're going to need to sit close together somehow.
We have approximately
Maybe Paula, you can move up and sit between Jake and
6
Brian.
people listed in the text in our book. But if there's somebody that you know who has passed into the bardo recently, you can recite their name when that moment occurs.
So that means someone within the last 49 days. If you're not sure, of course, you can say the name of anyone, but that's the principle. You good? You folks online have it out? All right. So we will say it in English, except for the mantras.
At the end.
And there's one at the beginning also.
Oh, yes.
And again, this is an expression of compassion. Basically, if the language is unfamiliar to you, we're praying for the whole world, for all beings to be happy. And we're asking for help, that our prayer be animated by the power of all the awakened beings throughout space. In the great way of the Mahayana, we feel there have been infinite Buddhas who are right now beaming down, as Nathaniel said earlier. Buddhists like to look at us, apparently, and they will look at us, especially when we sing and pray. All right? So the homage to the 3 jewels. 3 jewels of the Buddha, the Buddha's teaching, and us, the community. Namaratna Trayaya. To the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions in the past, present, and future, I make prostration. I worship them with offerings. I go to you for refuge. I entreat you to bestow empowering blessings. Based on these virtuous roots, may it be that I and all limitless sentient beings, the deer, the cats, in all of our lifetimes, come into contact with authentic mentors, friends in virtue, who will show us the path. May we have lives in which the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages are all completely present, and naturally have control over our own and others' aims. May we have the power to cause all wandering beings to dwell in an ocean of bliss and happiness. May Buddha's precious teaching, the scriptures, and the realizations be universally perceived in an unbiased and non-sectarian manner, and to be thoroughly in harmony with reality.
May the teachings,
the explanations, and the accomplishments spread as far as the sky to the ends of the earth. May occurrences such as the disruptions caused by illness, confusion, and warfare be destroyed in their own place. May our lives and conduct be equal to those during the glorious happiness and well-being of the perfect age. Let them be equal to the Buddha universe, blissful. May all sentient beings, once their lifespans are over experience no suffering as they are about to die, and when their principal energy channels cease to function, may the mistaken appearances of the intermediate state, the bardo between death and rebirth, dissolve in their own place. In particular, may this be so for the following, new to the intermediate state, our beloved recently deceased.
Bob Bullock, Kaiha Sariaho, Steve Seekins, Simone Schrader, Brian McKenna, Otho McGregor, and Tina Turner.
And may it be that those in such an intermediate state be transported to the Buddha universe of Sukhavati, the joyous. In brief, may it be that without wandering through time in all samsaric forms, all sentient beings come to achieve their own and others' aims without impediment, just as did the Buddha Siddhartha, the one who achieved all aims. Thus, in order to bring things about in accordance with this, through the power of the three jewels and the truth of the inevitability of actions and their effects, may whatever aspirations are made come about just as they are meant to. Tadyata panchati avabodhana ye soha. Thus, with the motivation and wish that the aspirations that have been made come to be, I, known as Jerme Tupten Gyatso, and ordained in the lineage of Shakyamuni, have written this for Westerners in the American Dharma Center, White Jewel Mountain. May this aspirational prayer be auspicious and her virtue in all places and times. Sarva Mangalam. Written January 7th, 2007 at the Circle Lake Retreat Center in Texas. Transcribed and edited by Tulku Jurmi Tsering and again by Adzon Rinpoche, and translated as best he could by Keter Sangbo, an American layman, slightly modified and input by Dawn Mountain Research Institute, Harvey Harrison, Elizabeth Wallet, Mark Urowitz. Sadhu, sadhu. And let's do the blessing prayer, and then we'll do the traditional stuff. So this is a prayer we also always do to bless everybody in English.
There's a, no, leave that on. There's a switch on the bottom.
Okay.
The switch on the bottom.
Okay. With all of you in mind, we light this lamp of clarity. May the glow of love, wisdom shine within us, everyone, till we all rise forth born in one enlightened mandala. Another prayer for all beings, and especially for these beings.
Today, we hold all beings throughout space in our dedication, and Blaze, Steve, Sandy, Cynthia Erezo, Anushka, Asha, Selva, Pat, Orlando, Thomas, Jackie, Ed, Bob, Claire, Sandy and Mike, Brian, Jake, those oppressed, animals, the farm, Tom Reed, Dean, Glenn, Bob Bullock in the Bardo, all those killed or injured in train accident in India, Kaya Sarihaho in Bardo, Jerry, Steve Seekins in Bardo, Simone Schrader in Bardo, David Schrader, Felix Schrader, Jen Schrader, Suzanne Knapp, Esteban, Sherab Gyatso, Chuying Drolma, Tulku Urso, Lama Tultim, Ani Tultim, Brian McKenna in the Bardo, Autumn Alexander, Otho McGregor, Jay and Annalie, John Hyde, Jerry Edgington, Monica, Ben, Camachos, Emily, Gary, Kaisu, and Tina Turner in the Tina Turner in the Bardo.
And we send out to them an light of love and blessings from your heart to all these. Just one out.
The soak fixins are here.
What?
Are they all here?
They're all here, there's more over there. So we will open the bags, part of the ritual. We're not allowed to eat food here, but we're going to open it as we bless it. We invite everyone to sing.